Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we're starting a new series. This one we're reading through in the Buddha's words, teachings of the Buddha, an anthology of discourses from the Pali Canon. It's also got a foreword by the Dalai Lama. But let's go ahead and get started here. Before we get into any of the parts, it has a picture of a Buddha statue, and it says, "Tamed, he is supreme being among those who tame. At peace, he is the sage among those who bring peace. Freed, he is the chief of those who set free. Delivered, he is the best of those who deliver." So yeah. Forward. More than 2,500 years have passed since our kind teacher Buddha Sakyamuni taught in India. He offered advice to all those who wished to heed it, inviting them to listen, reflect, and critically examine what he had to say. He addressed different individuals and groups of people over a period of more than 40 years. After the Buddha's passing, a record of what he said was maintained as an oral tradition. Those who heard the teachings would periodically meet with others for communal recitations of what they had heard and memorized. In due course, these recitations from memory were written down, laying the basis for all subsequent Buddhist literature. The Pali Canon is one of the earliest of these written records and the only complete early version that has survived intact. Within the Pali Canon, the texts known as the Nikayas have a special value of being a single cohesive collection of the Buddha's teachings in his own words. These teachings cover a wide range of topics. They deal not only with the renunciation and liberation, but also with the proper relations between husbands and wives, the management of the household, and the way countries should be governed. They explain the path of spiritual development from generosity and ethics through mind training and the realization of wisdom, all the way up to the attainment of liberation. The teachings from the Nikayas collected here provide a fascinating insight into how the Buddha's teachings were studied, preserved, and understood in the early days of Buddhism's development. Modern readers will find them especially valuable for reinvigorating and clarifying their understanding of many fundamental Buddhist doctrines. Clearly, the Buddha's essential message of compassion, ethical responsibility, mental tranquility, and discernment is as relative today as it was more than 2,500 years ago. Although Buddhism spread and took root in many parts of Asia, evolving into diverse traditions according to the place and occasion, distance and differences of language limited exchange between Buddhists in the past. One of the results of modern improvements in transport and communications that I most appreciate is the vastly expanded opportunities those interested in Buddhism now have to acquaint themselves with the full range of Buddhist teachings and practice. What I find especially encouraging about this book is that it shows so clearly how much fundamentally all schools of Buddhism have in common. I congratulate Bhikkhu Bodhi for this careful work of compilation and translation. I offer my prayers that readers may find advice here and the inspiration to put it into practice, and will enable them to develop inner peace, which I believe is essential for the creation of a happier and more peaceful world. Venerable Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama. Preface. The Buddha's discourses preserved in the Pali Canon are called suttas, the Pali equivalent of the Sanskrit word sutras. Although the Pali Canon belongs to a particular Buddhist school, the Theravada, or School of the Elders, the suttas are by no means exclusively Theravada Buddhist texts. They stem from the earliest period of the Buddhist literary history, a period lasting roughly 100 years after the Buddha's death, before the original Buddhist community divided into different schools. The Pali Suttas have counterparts from other early Buddhist schools now extinct, texts sometimes strikingly similar to the Pali version, differing mainly in the settings and arrangements, but not in the points of doctrine. The suttas, along with their counterparts, thus can constitute the most ancient records of the Buddha's teachings available to us. They are the closest we can come to what the historical Buddha Gautama himself actually taught. The teachings found in them have served as the fountainhead, the primal source for all the evolving streams of Buddhist doctrine and practice through the centuries. For this reason, they constitute the common heritage of the entire Buddhist tradition, and Buddhists of all schools who wish to understand the taproot of Buddhism should take a close and careful study of them a priority. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha's discourses are preserved in collections called Nikayas. Over the past 20 years, fresh translations of the four major Nikayas have appeared in print, issued in attractive and affordable editions. Wisdom Publications pioneered this development in 1987 when it published Maurice Walsh's translation of the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha. Wisdom followed this precedent by bringing out in 1995 my revised and edited version of Bhikkhu Nanamoli's handwritten translation of the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourse of the Buddha, followed in 2000 by my new translation of the complete Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha. In 1999, under the imprint of Sacred Literature Trust Series, Altamira Press published an anthology of suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya, translated by the late Jan Ponika Thera and myself, titled Numerical Discourses of the Buddha. I am currently working on this new translation of the entire Anguttara Nikaya, intended for Wisdom Publications teaching of the Buddha series. Many who have read these larger works have told me, to my satisfaction, that the translations brought the suttas to life for them. Yet others who earnestly sought to enter the deep ocean of the Nikayas told me something else. They said that while the language of the translations made them far more accessible than earlier translations, they were still grappling for a standpoint from which to see the Suta's overall structure, a framework within which they all fit together. The Nikayas themselves do not offer much help in this respect for their arrangement. They are a notable exception of the Samyutta Nikaya, which does have a thematic structure, appears almost haphazard. In the ongoing series of lectures, I began giving the Bodhi Monastery in New Jersey in January 2003, I devised a scheme of my own to organize the contents of Majjhima Nikaya. This scheme unfolds the Buddha's message progressively from the simple to the difficult, from the elementary to the profound. Upon reflection, I saw that this scheme could be applied not only to the Majjhima Nikaya, but to the four Nikayas as a whole. The present book organizes suttas selected from all four Nikayas within this thematic and progressive framework. This book is intended for two types of readers. The first are those not yet acquainted with the Buddha's discourses who feel the need for a systematic introduction. For such readers, many of the Nikayas is bound to appear opaque. All four of them viewed at once may seem like a jungle, entangling and bewildering, full of unknown beasts. Or like the great ocean, vast, tumultuous, and forbidding. I hope that this book will serve as a map to help them win their way through the jungle of suttas, or as a sturdy ship to carry them across the ocean of the Dhamma. The second type of readers whom this book is meant are those already acquainted with the suttas who still cannot see how they fit together into an intelligible whole. For such readers, individual suttas may be comprehensible in themselves, but the text in their totality appear like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle scattered across a table. Once one understands the scheme in this book, one should come away with a clear idea of the architecture of the teaching. Then, with a little reflection, one should be able to determine the place any sutta occupies in the edifice of the Dhamma, whether or not it has been included in this anthology. This anthology, or any other anthology of suttas, is no substitute for the Nikayas themselves. My hope is twofold, corresponding to the two types of readers for whom this volume is designed. One, that newcomers to early Buddhist literature find this volume whets their appetite for more and encourages them to take the plunge into the full Nikayas. And two, that experienced readers of the Nikayas finish the book with a better understanding of material with which they are already familiar. If this anthology is meant to make any other point, it is to convey the sheer breadth and range of the Buddha's wisdom. While early Buddhism is sometimes depicted as a discipline of world renunciation intended primarily for ascetics and contemplatives, the ancient discourses of the Pali Canon clearly show us how the Buddha's wisdoms and compassion reached into the very depths of mundane life, providing ordinary people with guidelines for proper conduct and right understanding. Far from being a creed of the monastic elite, ancient Buddhism involved the close collaboration of householders and monastics in the twin task of maintaining the Buddha's teachings and assisting one another in their efforts to walk the path to the extinction of suffering. To fulfill these tasks meaningfully, the Dhamma had to provide them with deep and inexhaustible guidance, inspiration, joy, and consolation. It could never have done this if it had not directly addressed their earliest efforts to combine social and family obligations with an aspiration to realize the highest. Almost all the passages included in this book have been selected from the above-mentioned publications of the four Nikayas. Almost all have undergone revisions, usually slight, but sometimes major, to accord with my own evolving understanding of the text and the Pali language. I have newly translated a small number of suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya, not included in the above-mentioned anthology. I have also included a handful of suttas from the Udana and the Ituvataka, two small books belonging to the fifth Nikaya, the Khuddaka Nikaya, the minor and miscellaneous collection. I have based these on John D. Ireland's translation published by the Buddhist Publication Society in Sri Lanka, but again I have freely modified them to fit my own preferred diction and terminology. I have given preference to suttas in prose over those in verse, as being more direct and explicit. When a sutta concludes with verses, if those merely restate the preceding prose in the interest of space, I have omitted them. For each chapter begins with an introduction in which I explain the salient concepts relevant to the theme of the chapter and try to show how the text I have chosen exemplify that theme. To clarify points arising from both the introductions and the text, I have included endnotes. These often draw upon the classical commentaries to the Nikayas ascribed to the great South Indian commentator Acharya Buddhaghosa, who worked in Sri Lanka in the 5th century CE. For the sake of concision, I have not included as many notes in this book as I have in my other translations of the Nikayas. These notes are also not as technical as those in the full translations. References to the sources follow each selection. References to text from the Digha Nikaya and the Majjhima Nikaya cite the number and name of the sutta in Pali. Passages from these two collections retain the paragraph numbers used in the long discourses of the Buddha and the middle-length discourses of the Buddha, so readers who wish to locate these passages within the full translations can easily do so. References to text from the Samyutta Nikaya cite Samyutta and Sutta number. Text from the Anguttara Nikaya cite Nipata and the Sutta number. The 1s and 2s also cite chapters within the Nipata, followed by the Sutta number. References to text from the Udana cite Nipata and Sutta number. Text from the Ituvataka cite simply the Sutta number. All references are followed by the volume and the page number in the Pali Text Society's standard edition of these works. I am grateful to Timothy McNeil and David Kittlestrom of Wisdom Publications for urging me to persist with this project in the face of long periods of indifferent health. Samanera Analayo and Bhikkhu Nyanasobhaya Bono read and commented on my introductions, and John Kelly reviewed proofs of the entire book. All three made useful suggestions for which I am grateful. John Kelly also prepared the table of sources that appears in the back of the book. Finally, I am grateful to my students of Pali and Dhamma studies at Bodhi Monastery for their enthusiastic interest in the teachings of the Nikayas, which inspired me to compile this anthology. I am especially thankful to the monastery's extraordinary founder, Venerable Master Jin Chun, for welcoming a monk of another Buddha's tradition to his monastery and for his interest in bridging the northern and southern transmissions of the early Buddhist teachings. Bhikkhu Bodhi. Table of contents. Alright, we'll go ahead and end this episode there because we'll next be getting into the general introduction of the book. But that gives us the foreword and preface of the book itself. Which is just an introduction to the author, what he's talking about and dealing with and everything. I may be wrong on this, but I think Buddhism is based on Hinduism, but with Buddha's teachings included. I think. You know, the two definitely met, Hinduism and Buddhism, since Buddha was in India so much. So yeah. But you'll see a lot of other cultures adopt Buddhism, so especially when you get further east in Asia. A lot of your Southeastern Asia countries, a lot of Japan, probably Korea and China have some Buddhist followers. I'm pretty sure they do, since China also has other faiths. I cannot talk. But, yeah. Gives us a good introduction to the author himself, and the Dalai Lama's forward there was interesting. So, but let's go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.